It's more about people, and change is a tricky thing, and landcare touches in all areas of farming and business.
Welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Vines, the wellbeing podcast for growers, proudly brought to you by the Wine Grape Council of South Australia, sponsored by PIRSA, hosted by
journalist and award-winning mental health podcaster Callum McPherson,
and columnist for The Australian and the World of Fine Wine and Australia's leading wine writer when sold by the kilo, Nick Ryan. Let's crush this. Trudie Stanley joins us today to talk about how her origins on the farm in the mid-north have led her to a career focused on the wellbeing and success of agribusiness. She's here to talk to us today about her role heading up the Family and Business Support Program, a free confidential mentor service available to all people working in agribusiness who just might need a chat. All the show notes and all the information about how you can access this incredibly important service will be available on the Wine Grape Council website.
Trudie, what was it like for you growing up on the farm?
Oh, I had a great childhood, I suppose, and always in amongst things and in quite a big family, involved in the everyday around the farm, just that idyllic, I suppose, chance to get out and get dirty, and enjoyed all the things involved in having that space around you, having that opportunity to, learn about nature. And I suppose that helped me, define where I wanted to go with my career. And
where was the farm?
So, it was a property in between Port Pirie and Christa Brook at a little place called Neuron. So we are sheep cereal farmers. My family's still there, and so I still have the opportunity to get up there at times, which is great. But Dad was always great. My brother, always great in helping me get involved in the farm, and I've always had that interest in seeing how things grow and
once
how
that
people
dirt gets
are
in the
involved.
blood.
It is. It's in the blood,
it's there for life.
And it's also that community that you have around you. So it's there. And I was lucky enough to move into working in primary industries in that same region, so in the Northern and Yorke region, Northern Ag Districts and Yorke Peninsula, and that's given me an opportunity to see beyond even my own community and how, beyond that community I grew up in, and how people in rural and regional areas operate.
Yeah, so I guess you can see sort of the commonalities between various regional communities. There's a lot of things that they all share in common.
Yeah, there definitely is. The love of the land and making things and growing things, having that capacity to, enjoy the nature that you live within, really appreciating the climate, the weather, how that influences everything that you do.
Another thing that everyone has in common is the challenges as well, because obviously farming's not all smooth sailing. How aware were you of how challenging it could be when you were growing up? Did you see much of that? Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing, because as a child you don't necessarily tap into it. I was a child in the 70s, and there was this a drought around that time, and my father went off property and became a car salesman just to keep some sort of income, and I don't have any real recollection of perhaps the stress that the farm, the people in amongst the farm were really feeling at that stage. I just had the clean air and the space around me.
They purposely kept that separate from you, or that you just weren't tapping into it?
I think it's a bit of both. I think kids can be quite responsive to it or understand it, but won't necessarily pin it in their mind. It was just what happened. You didn't know any different. That was where you were existing. So sometimes we're very conscious of how we might be influencing our children or whatever, but kids are resilient, and that's certainly my experience. I didn't necessarily notice the stress that the lack of rain
could, it's obviously
could
there, it has to be there.
Yeah.
How did your family approach those struggles throughout your life? I mean, you said your dad went and worked another job at certain times to be able to pay the bills. Generally, how did they front up to those challenges as they happen? They always take them on with a can-do attitude, or what do you remember the sort of the atmosphere being like? I suppose?
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely that connectedness, being able to talk things through. And, you know, I say I don't have a huge memory of it, but it's one of those things. Mum and Dad were really, or are really keen on that family unit, and we always had those opportunities in the day where you would share the meal and talk. Yeah, and have that discussion around that. So I think that family structure, that farming structure around you. We were also religious, so you had that. You know, you had those different communities that you could tap into. So I think, you know, without really consciously knowing it, but even as my parents, as my family, you know, those are just the things that you do that maintain that ongoing maintenance of emotional well-being. And, you know, yes, conditions aren't great, but you can...
In terms of what you had there to cope with it, you had those structures in place, but I suppose that's not always the case for certain families, depending on how they cope with things. But having all that set up and having that open dialogue would go a long way towards helping everyone through those times when they get tough.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really important thing. And, you know, it's good to have networks around you. It might not be your family, you know. Families can be tricky things.
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows that.
Friends can be tricky things. But I think the important thing is to know that you can talk to someone and that you have an outlet where that, communication can happen. Sometimes just talking about something makes a huge difference, I feel.
And you went off to TAFE and then uni. After school, what were you planning to do with those qualifications?
Yeah, so I did natural resource management. So I think originally I was thinking of park ranger or something, something like that.
The full Skippy fantasy.
It really followed on from that. You know, the love of the natural world that I sort of had. I was interested in that kind of area. So studied at Roseworthy, which was the environmental course, but it had a lot of agricultural influences within that. You know, we also had that meld in, so it was a great way to bring those two together. And then I think when I got to that point of working, one of my initial jobs was back in Port Pirie at TAFE, working more specifically in environmental work, but then an opportunity came up at Jamestown as landcare officer. So I thought I'd hop to Jamestown. I was lucky enough to get the position. I went through all the proper processes, but I did get that position. It was just a short-term position, but it was a great opportunity to get into the network. And I think I sort of went into that, I'm going to change the world, you know, as you do
as
at
everyone does,
young age.
So naive.
And thought it would be so easy just to, you know, change things. I think once I got into the world, I got into the area and realised, you know, it's more about people, and change is a tricky thing, you know. So, and landcare touches in all areas of farming business. You know, a lot of people think of the trees, but, you know, there's just every aspect of sustainable agriculture. So I had a huge learning curve as well, even though I'd been to uni. You know, there was lots to learn and constantly learning more. So, that was sort of, I suppose, where I had that opportunity to work with different communities across that region. And I have continued along that way, I suppose, for several years. Like I said, I was a child of the 70s, so I've been around a little while, but had the pleasure of meeting so many people and learning so much from how people run businesses. And there's no two businesses that are the same. People do it their own way, and that's what, you know, keeps it interesting. And, you know, it really made me realise that there's so much in agricultural primary production businesses.
No two businesses, you know, are the same, but there are sort of fundamental
principles.
foundations for, successful agribusiness.
Yes,
Do you want
for
to
sure.
touch on some of those?
Yeah, look, there's the foundation of your finances, but it's also around your communications and your HR, how you evaluate your risk, and everyone sees those sorts of things differently. So I suppose it's keeping all of those things in check, weighing up your risks, cost benefits, and how you can approach things and when you can approach things, and just taking that time to look at the whole of the business, I suppose.
So after that initial job, you stayed in similar sort of work. You went on and ended up becoming a regional coordinator?
Yeah, that was in natural resource management. So in the region at the time, the landscape board processes were starting to happen. So yeah, I was working with individuals from across the region, communities across the region, building up that information around the natural resource management plan and how people can link into those processes to ensure that at the regional level, people are aware of the key things.
So was that when you really moved into helping people who are running regional businesses with what they needed support with, or did that come later?
Across all these areas, I suppose I've worked in, back in the day there was property management planning, and there's been various different business planning sort of processes. So I suppose I've always had that bit of an interest. I moved to Adelaide for family reasons and started my own family and was focused on that for several years, but the opportunity came up in primary industries and regions, so where I had been previously working, but to look at work within a program that they were already running. It was called the Family and Business Support Program, and they, primary industries, had sort of grown in the millennium drought long before I was around, but involved with the program. But I think primary industries at that time had been working with communities. I think it was particularly in the Riverland area, but obviously at that time, there was drought throughout. And working with those communities, there was, discussion around this need just for people to have someone to talk to. People just feeling potentially a little bit isolated, not knowing what the next step might be, big challenges in amongst the millennium drought. And I think at that time, those people, so what primary industries did was work with those communities and try to get people a little bit more localised. So they're not the normal, or not the regular sort of primary industry staff. They're people that are embedded in those local communities, often people that are going through similar things, but people that were prepared to put their hand up and say, look, we'll be there to support others if needed. So at that time, the program that they were called FAB Scouts. So that the FAB stands for Family and Business Support, so Family and Business Scouts. So they were just people that were already in the region and were just there to, if someone was needing some of those networks, someone to talk to, they could ring up and just have a quick chat over the phone, because sometimes it's around just people being able to take the time to listen.
Yep.
I think now more than ever, there's lots of apps and there's lots of socials that people can scroll through, and we're all very connected. But that process of being able to talk to someone, and for someone to be able to really actively listen to what you're saying, not necessarily have all the answers, but just to be able to hear your unique situation and hear how you're feeling and give you that opportunity to verbalise it. Sometimes that can just be enough to feel listened to. So now moving on in time, and I've only been involved in the last few years, but when this more recent drought happened, and I think the Riverland hailstorms, that was before I was involved, but that PIRSA at that time decided to have a similar model, and so that's now called the Family and Business Mentors the Fab Mentors program or service that's available to people. So it's sort of grown from those events. So PIRSA is, I suppose, involved because of those events. People's communities are impacted, and these people, we work with the community at those times when those things are happening to say, you know, who might be someone that would be prepared to provide support if needed.
So is that now a service that's available all the time? It used to surround those big events, but is it just ongoing now?
Yeah, so now, and certainly when I came on board in the program, it was very much reliant on funding. You know, it was just trying to hold it together enough in amongst events. But we have been able to secure a bit more long-term funding so we can support those sort of people, or the Fab Mentors, to be in communities on a bit more of an ongoing basis, which is great. So the team has built up through those events. And I suppose it's that time when that pressure is on, that people can identify the people that might be able to provide that support. So that's a lot of the time, that's how we've identified the Fab Mentors. So we have about 14 currently across the state. They're not full-time PIRSA officers.
Yeah, the people with their own businesses.
Yeah, they're people that have their own businesses and are based in agricultural communities, have an understanding of areas and issues around that time, you know, around the events, but beyond that, they have those skills and that experience, that wisdom.
Yeah, which is why they're relatable, because it has to come from someone who understands it.
Yeah, so they're the people that we currently have available. They might not get that much work. I always have a bit of a joke and say, like, we're happy if you're not busy.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
And, you know, like I say, they are balancing these roles within their own businesses as well. But, yeah, it's just good to have that sort of network that is available. So if people feel, and it might be for lots of different reasons, that they just feel, you know, they might have their own communication network, their own family network, or their own network of friends or peers that they, you know, normally talk to around lots of things. But it might be getting to that point where they just want to sound it off with someone who's independent. It's completely confidential.
And fresh eyes to look at a situation.
Yeah, fresh eyes, that's right. So it's completely confidential. The Fabs have their own processes where they work with people. They don't have to come back and report to primary industries or anything. As in details, they just report on hours. So it's just an opportunity to have people that are out there and able to discuss matters if you need it. You know,
what's the benefit, do you think, of speaking to someone who's not involved in the day-to-day of your business?
I suppose it gives those fresh eyes, as Nick said. It also just might remove that pressure that you might be feeling. So if there's big decisions to be made, sometimes it's upsetting to talk about it with the people you care the most about, or the people that you're going to see at footy on the weekend or something.
We've heard previously that a big reason for not sharing something with your partner, let's say, might be that you know it's a problem, it's keeping you up at night, you're not sure how to fix it, and you don't want to keep them up at night as well when you think that they're not going to necessarily be able to help the situation.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, I reckon. And the Fab Mentors are there to talk about it, but they're not going to be the professional help necessarily if that's where you need to head. So
they can direct you towards it.
Yeah, they can listen. And it doesn't mean that just because you need to talk to someone that it means you need that professional help. But if they have that understanding that if they think there's avenues that you can take that will help you along the way, there's lots of support out there. And sometimes it's just about knowing it's there and knowing how to access it. So yeah, it's a nice option to have there that's not as in your face or as scary necessarily as going to see, say, a psychologist, or if you feel a particular way, a business
mentor or whoever it might be.
Yes.
It's just like it's someone that you can chat to that has an idea of what you're going through, who might be able to give you some feedback and maybe refer you on. So it's not as scary or daunting maybe as going and, or you might not know where else to go, and they can be the one that connects
I think that's definitely the model, you know. And like I say, each situation's going to be different and unique, but it's just that opportunity, maybe a starting point, or it might be just being able to talk to someone about it and bounce off ideas.
How long do those relationships go on for typically?
Yeah, look, I don't really know the details. I think some people it's just a phone call. They might just need that little bit of
something.
Advice. Some people it might be more of a check-in over time, just to once again be that sounding board, just that check-in, and just to know that someone else is, you know, thinking about you, that type of thing. It will depend on the discussion that you have with the FAB mentor, just how much further it, you know, how long it continues the conversation, but it's just that opportunity. And like I say, sometimes it might just be a phone call, but if it's appropriate, you know, you might have a face-to-face, and it might be a more longer-term sort of check-in. But it's really up to the FAB mentor and the primary producer to have, you know, to work that through. So it sort of adapts to
what sort of issues do you typically see creep in during those tough times as people try to cope with stuff that's happening that's beyond their control? Often
financial pressures that can start people you know, needing to, you know, feeling the pinch a bit and needing to have that conversation and not knowing perhaps exactly what that next step is. But it can also be things related to family situations, changing family situations as, you know, parents age and families grow, younger kids come into the family, and, you know, it's always evolving, that sort of process, I suppose, and setting up those situations where people can just keep up with how things are changing. And so they're probably a couple of big ones, just around financial pressures, maybe succession pressures to work out how things will progress in time, and communication, you know, just the simple part of communicating that within
and it's very easy
a
when
business and a
you've
family.
got those sorts of pressures on you that you can't actually, you know, all you can focus on is the problem, and you can't see a solution because the problem is just compounding. And it's just sometimes to be able to come at it from a different angle, to just say the words sometimes rather than let them swirl
someone else.
around your head.
You hear yourself say it, and someone else listens and reflects that back to you. And
they may see something completely different in the situation that you just, for the life of you, can't see.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it's a valuable process in itself. So, like I say, the FAB mentors aren't, you know, they're not going to be providing advice or be business advisors or clinical counsellors. They're not going to provide that level. They're really just to, you know, help you to think things through, be a bit of a sounding board, just start that conversation, that process. So,
and it is remarkable, you know, I think we've all found ourselves in situations like that once you do just sort of talk to someone about it, you know, there seems like the clouds part, and you can see a way through a bit. Just you feel so much better for having just sort of got some stuff off your chest.
Yeah, I know myself. Things start getting, you know, pointy, I suppose, and it all goes into my head. And, you know, farmers become farmers, grape growers become grape growers, because they do enjoy working out in the field and on their own, being their own boss. And it's a great thing, but it can have the flip side of
and we've talked about that with previous guests about sometimes you can be too much in your own head, and then, you know, that can cause problems. Sometimes it's better to get those things out of your head.
Yeah, and that might manifest in drinking more, drug use, or depression and anxiety, relationship issues. Are those things ever coming up in these conversations with FAB mentors, where people are admitting to that and saying, "Oh, I'm probably drinking more than I was before," or those sorts of issues? Or
I think it's definitely out there, and it is things that, that the FAB mentors come up against, constantly, I suppose. And I suppose where we get involved is often where there's an adverse event like the drought, which is really a slow creeping, terrible thing, or bushfires, or pest and disease outbreaks. These events really
trigger people.
They just compound and exacerbate stuff that's already there. They probably just make it really pointy, I suppose, and really tricky. So, often where there are issues around like that, obviously the FAB mentor will just be signposting to more professional help and assistance. But, like I say, it's just that starting point. The process has come from community sort of saying, it's just that first step sometimes that can be hard for people to start talking or to go somewhere else for help rather than keeping it, behind the farm gate or whatever. So,
what do people who've used this service said about how it's been able to help them?
Yeah, we've probably not done enough monitoring and evaluation, but certainly we've had anecdotal back through the FAB mentors that, some people, and that's why I do say sometimes it's just that conversation, people that have just texted back and said, it was so good to talk today, I'm going to make that next step. They're probably just the simple anecdotal feedback.
Why are people choosing to become mentors when they already are? Imagine
what makes a good
mentor?
mentor?
They don't have much time, so why typically are people choosing to take that on?
Yeah, like I said, some of our mentors have come through from adverse events that are actually happening, like they're part of it. The fires, recent fires, where people within those communities at that time, even though, they're pretty close to everything that's happening, they want to help their own community. So there's people that have that interest. We do have a couple of FAB mentors that have counselling and psychological backgrounds, that mental health experience. But we also have FAB mentors that have really got business focus, have worked in regions, still work in the regions, in those areas, in businesses that means they're talking with farmers and the primary producers a lot. So they can see it out there. They're the ones that are out there seeing all this stuff, and they've built up their understanding of the importance of that mental, that emotional wellbeing. So just having that understanding of that, it is good to make sure people have those networks. And so I suppose the FAB mentors in that instance, where they have that business background, where they have that community background, they've taken on that interest and done a bit further training, got a bit further training in, accidental counselling and things like that. So, I mean, most importantly, probably they just have that life experience, a lot of them, where they've, been able to build up their own experiences and sort of have a feel for, how people might
It's that personal connection, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty much every time, where people know how it felt to be in that spot a lot of the time, and really want to help people to get through that, because so many have experienced one version or another, whether it's drought or it's fire or it's hailstorms. You know what it's like to be there and how bad that is. And I suppose when you're in that situation, you know what you would like in terms of help. And there's been times in the past where plenty of people have felt like they weren't able to access that. So if you can be that person for someone else, and there is such a strong sense of community out in the regions.
I think that's true. I mean, they're a great bunch of people, and they are those people that have those communication skills, that connectedness, and they see the value perhaps of how they can assist. We've built up I suppose we're always trying to maintain that understanding of what assistance is out there. And
why are you so passionate about mental health and wellbeing in the regions?
I love, my heart's in the country, I suppose, and I loved working with rural communities. You know, people don't really appreciate just what rural communities sometimes have to go through and exist within, I suppose. So I think I just always admire people that live in the regions and in those rural communities. But I also really feel that it's so important just to always be exercising our mental health and our emotional well-being. You know, like it's not just a point in time. It's a constant thing we have to work on. I think it's an opportunity to sort of help people along that way to understand that as well.
What are some things that you do to stay on top of your own mental health?
Well, one thing I do, try and keep in the moment. So before this podcast, I'm trying not to think about it too much.
Tangible advice.
No, it is just being able to stay in the moment and not take on too much. You know, just focus on what you can control. Make sure you're keeping that balance of doing things that you enjoy and not getting too focused on the challenges. Communication, trying to keep those networks around you, family and friends who you can, bounce ideas off of and talk to. So, yeah, that's the type of things I like to do. Another one that I should do more is exercise. And getting out.
You and me both.
We've heard that a lot.
So try to do as much of that as possible as well. But those are the type of things that I like to do. And one of the things the Fab Mentors worked with the iFarm Well program, which is another starting point, I suppose, if you do feel like you're, just needing to check in. It's an app that just gives you a chance to have a look at how things fit within.
And that iFarm Well program, is fantastic, and that accessibility of it, that you can have it always there, and it's just available if you need it to, dive into the resources there. It's fantastic.
It is a fantastic resource, and I've done so much work with it. And one of the aspects of it that we worked with the UniSA with building that mentor process within that app. So it doesn't have to be a Fab mentor, but just to have someone else that if, so often in life, if we tell ourselves we're going to do something, we can, get around it. But if we have someone else on board with us, it just helps to hold us up to it and make us do it. So there's a capacity within that to have a buddy or a friend. I can't remember the technical terms on the app, but, that you can say, this person can check in on, not that they necessarily see what you have in it, but it's just that, how's things going? Have you checked in lately on the stuff that you have to, keep in your mind as a priority.
And then iFarm Well's been designed by farmers for farmers as well. So there's been that input. So it's in the right language and it's going to feel right, I suppose, if you're using it. And then part of that's about upskilling people to be able to recognise signs and build some self-awareness around their well-being as well. Because I suppose if you're accessing help from someone else, or you're just having a chat to someone else, that's part of the problem. But you got to try to learn about yourself and how you're being affected by challenges that you're facing as well. So that, I guess you're going to have to become resilient no matter what if you're working as a farmer. But perhaps just it's a skill. I think well-being is a skill that you have to build. You can't just wait till there's a crisis and then not see the steps that led up to it and then repeat the same pattern. You have to be able to be wise to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good description of just, keeping at it all the time. And it might be that crisis that really sets it off, but I suppose you can build that resilience so that you can manage it.
We've been talking a lot about, being aware of how you're feeling yourself, but how do we become better sounding boards or mentors for others?
That's a really good question. I think the big one is, in our busy worlds, listening we're busy, and it's really to take the time to actively listen to someone can be hard. It's really hard just to take the time, let alone to really, because there's always something else in your head that you're thinking about the next thing.
Yeah.
Where I've got to be at, whatever time, or what's on my phone that I need to see, because that's so important for me to keep looking at what's on my phone. So I think that part of communication, we sometimes miss that listening.
What's so special about that? Just being able to just sit there and actually listen to someone and give them 100% of your focus when they've got something to say.
Yeah, I think it helps them to not feel like they're just getting fobbed off, or it can help them sort of talk more detailed. They can get into, like you're doing to me today, that you get into more detail, you take the time to get to the nitty gritty, and it does make, it makes you think about it actively yourself. Yeah. As the talker, the person that's listening to you is encouraging more to.
Yeah, and something Mary O'Brien said in an earlier episode, she's talking about often when when we're having those conversations and someone's telling us about, their problems, and we sort of naturally go, well, yeah, I've got shit going on too, and then we sort of...
And we one-up each other.
This is my situation, like yours.
Which is a kind of distorted empathy thing, but sometimes it's better just to... It's actually not about what's going on with you. This person needs to talk, this person needs to... So sometimes just listening and taking that on rather than having to,
because it comes from a good place where we think this is going to make this person feel better, but then...
My life's shit too.
But now, and that's good to an extent, but then it becomes you talking about your situation. And I think what we've learned a lot from this series is just keeping things simple. And when someone's talking and they need someone to listen to, just shut up is a good thing, and then wait till there's an appropriate moment, and then maybe give them a different perspective or whatever. But at the very least, something that can mean so much is just really just listening, because as well as what you might say, just by doing that, and the person who needs to talk to someone might not even realise it at the moment, but you're showing them that someone cares enough to listen to this, and therefore what you're saying is valid, and you're not crazy for thinking it, just by sitting there with them and listening to them. And, that might not even be obvious at the time, but that's the message that we send to people, rather than trying to jump in and fix a problem or say, okay, but that's not that bad. What about this,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so true.
So how do you describe the satisfaction that you get from doing your work?
Well, I love the work that I do. I work with a great bunch of people that are connected to all areas of the state. They're such a caring group of people, the Fab Mentors, so I'm always getting checked in on and how's things today and everything. So, look, for me, it's just wonderful that I can work with such a great group of people, and to feel that, it is filling a gap out there. It's not for everyone. Not everyone needs it, the Fab Mentor service, but it's good to know that it's there for when people do need that link or that person to talk to, So
how do people access it? And I will have links attached to this show and on the website and that sort of thing. But is there a number to call? Yeah,
so essentially you can ring the Fab Mentor phone numbers that are on the website direct. So you're only working with Fab Mentor. You can.
It's just straight to
them.
Yep.
Straight to them. We do have a recovery hotline number, which will also be on the website, that you can talk to someone about who might be the, best person for you to talk to out of the Fab Mentors, But really, you can just go and have a look at who's in what regions, and can link into the service that way.
So can you get help no matter where you are, or does it matter? Do you have to be somewhere particular?
No, wherever you are.
You just have to be on the phone.
You have to be on the phone. Yeah, and we even, we're really focused on primary producers and individuals and businesses that are associated, and families. So really, that throws the net fairly wide, that you can access the services. And, you know, like I said earlier, Primary Industries is not a health and wellbeing agency necessarily, but it's around I suppose the health and maintenance of agricultural businesses and in that area of recovery in adverse events. That's really been the driver of PIRSA being involved. And we're really just an enabler. Like I said, the FAB mentors are independent of PIRSA, but we are just enabling the service to be out there. So,
is there a vision to expand that service and have more mentors?
Look, we're always sort of, unfortunately, when adverse events happen, we're always sort of tapping into new resources. So, yeah, there's certainly some capacity to build on. And like anywhere, there's always, you know, changing and just evolving that happens within the program. So, but no, we are, you know, just trying to cover all bases. And, you know, at the moment across the state, there's a good number. And there's unfortunately been a lot of issues that we need to really have these people available. So,
well, I suppose unfortunately we can always bank on there being more challenges.
Yes, the nature of farming.
Unfortunately,
if there was, you know, what's the one thing you'd say if there was someone listening to this who's thinking, you know, do I pick up the phone or not? What's the one thing, you know, you would say to them right now to encourage them to do it?
Yeah, just do it, because there's no harm in doing it. It's just a chance to have a chat.
You're not going to lose anything.
It doesn't go anywhere. It's up to you to sort of navigate how you want to progress for yourself. So, yeah, it's just a chance to give it a try and jump in, I suppose. But look, if you have any need, give it a go, I reckon.
Trudie, 3 quick questions to end on that we've been asking most people on this show. Who makes your favourite wine in SA?
Oh, golly gosh.
Whoever makes the next one.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I'm going to say, oh, golly. I'll say Pikes. Pikes wine.
Nice. And red or white?
I'm a white.
I could have guessed that from Pikes. And what makes South Australian agriculture so special?
Oh, it's diversity and the people that are involved. I think, you know, we just have a great variety of people and progressive people that work in the state.
We've heard that so much. It's good that there's just been so much positivity surrounding that.
It's been the basics.
Seems like everyone really gets along from this show, which is good to hear.
Community. It's been.
Yes.
Which I suppose that's what you want, because you can't do it alone, and you need people to connect with and people that understand, and it seems like everyone's sort of willing to help each other.
I think so. And that's, like I said, that's really what's drawn me into working in agriculture, I suppose, is working with those communities back all that time ago. You know, you're always welcomed with open arms, and people are always trying to, I shouldn't say improve, but, you know, innovate and be progressive whilst being sustainable. You know, like people are really just striving for the best, which is great.
Thanks, Trudie.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening. Head to the Wine Grape Council of South Australia website for links and further resources. This is part of a bigger conversation, so feel free to share this podcast with your mates and look after yourselves. Cheers.